Mousetrap here. Thanks for tuning into this special edition of the Doublewide Dudes. We're here at the Texas Manufactured Housing Association convention out here in Dallas. Just a heads up, this is going to be a little bit longer episode than normal, but there's some really good information for both potential home buyers or people in the industry. Enjoy.
Hey, look! It's the Doublewide Dudes!
Oh, yeah. Well, all right. We're out here in Dallas at the beautiful Four Seasons Hotel, attending the Texas Manufactured Housing Association convention. And, man, what a beautiful place to hold this convention, AP.
It's a nice spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, big thanks to the TMHA for putting us up for the night.
Yeah, for setting us up.
Yeah, beautiful place.
Yeah, I'm real surprised on how big this industry really is, AP.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here.
Yeah, and it's real cool to see all the moving parts it takes to have affordable housing make an impact here in the state of Texas, and as well as seeing all the legislative stuff that TMHA is doing to protect consumers, home buyers, and families that choose to live in a manufactured home. On top of that, it's nice how they asked Broston to come out and give a talk on how we're using technology to improve our industry and the home buying experience.
Yeah, it's really cool getting to come up to Dallas. Saw a lot of people I've known throughout my career here in the industry. And as you know, Mousetrap, factory-built housing is something that I'm extremely passionate about. And there's so many cool things now with technology that we can all be using to make the home buying experience better for our customers. And really honored that TMHA gave us the opportunity to come up and share that with our peers. And we actually got the opportunity, Mousetrap, to sit down with DJ Pendelton. He's the executive director of TMHA, and kind of get a behind-the-scenes look at what this organization is doing to protect our industry, protect our consumers, and respond to the immediate need for housing now in the wake of Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah, it sounds like manufactured housing is going to play a big part in the reconstruction of the Texas coast. And this interview kind of took a turn in the end, huh?
Yeah, it did. You know, I was expecting a 10 or 15-minute interview with DJ to just kind of go over what our industry was going to do in response to Harvey. It kind of took a turn, Mousetrap, and really turned into something so much bigger than that.
Yeah, we're good now. If you just want to introduce who you are, what you do.
Sure, yeah. So I'm DJ Pendelton. I'm the executive director of the Texas Manufactured Housing Association. So the association primarily is a state-based advocacy group, trade group. We're a 501c6, which is a nonprofit, but for trade organizations. And we primarily advocate for manufactured housing and manufactured home communities at a state level, state legislative level, and regulatory level. We, just because of the size of Texas and some of the other things, we do get involved with some of the federal things and federal issues that are going on, and, through HUD and some of the other things and legislation there. But primarily, TMHA's focus is on state-based legislation and the regulatory environment.
Yeah. So DJ and I get to talking for a bit about this really important piece of legislation that he and his team just pushed through, and we'll get back to that here in a bit. But then we get to talking about the events that led up to him and TMHA's role in the reconstruction after Harvey.
So for those 6 months, January to June, every odd year, are very intense, long hour. This session we tacked on. They had a 30-day special session. Actually, it was a 29-day special session. So we got a little extra, a little overtime that we got to work on that. So that was real busy. And then it was one of those. I was like, okay, time to go home and reintroduce myself to my wife, and she can say, kids, this is what Dad looks like, and remember him. And just about the time it was like, okay, we're going to do vacations and and take it easy and do some of that stuff. Unfortunately, Harvey hit.
When you're out here in the darkness, you can. The wind is howling so loudly that it's really hard to hear anything beyond that.
Hurricane Harvey is making landfall as we speak.
Here in Corpus, we've been dealing
dealing with this strong wind, and it's been going for about 3 or 4 hours now.
Look at that wind right there. Not only is the water ponding, the wind is whipping it into a froth.
Even though this storm has come ashore, it's not the end of anything. This is really the beginning of the second and perhaps even the more deadly or dangerous phase.
When it started off, it was, I believe it was after some of the wildfires that hit, and it was this group that kind of came together that were trying to figure out some housing, and we were just talking onesie, twosie, threesie, foursie type people. Yeah. And when we first started off, we were in this room, about 6 of us, 8 of us, around 2 card tables pushed together. Well, the Thursday meeting after Harvey, you can imagine that room and that audience had grown quite a bit. Right. But we were in there. I was in there basically with all of the various federal and state agencies that touch in any manner, housing and emergency response. We were also in there with the Apartment Association. We were in there with HUD, USDA. The Army was in there. Red Cross was there, the governor's office, of course. Anyway, so we're working with them in all various different capacities with FEMA. FEMA's been, sending out requests. They've asked for some of our manufacturers to make some more units. Even though they are a last resort, I think the volume is going to be such that there's still going to be a purpose, a presence, a need for those MHUs that FEMA requires. Mm-hmm. Last week they came out with an RFI, request for information, for retailers' off-lot inventory. What do you have around the state that they could potentially buy? Who knows if they're going to buy that? Who knows if that anything that was just, they made it very, very clear it wasn't an RFP, it wasn't trying to do procurement, they're just trying to get their hands wrapped around what they've got at this point.
You were telling me about Hurricane Harvey and what our industry is doing to help with that.
Yeah, we're all in. We always are. We have kind of 2 phases. We have the role, whatever role we end up playing in the immediate temporary housing space, and then we have the role in the permanent reconstruction rehabilitation space. And so on the front end, that's what you might consider the FEMA units and things like that. And our guys, when we build those are kind of a last resort option a lot of times. They're going to put folks that have been into out of shelters, into apartments, into hotels, that sort of stuff. But sometimes we still kind of fit that need. But looking further down, I mean, unfortunately, where the 18 counties where the storm hit, I went and looked and pulled numbers, and by far, I'm not trying to insinuate that we had 100% loss or anything. I was just trying to gauge just overall how many manufactured homes are in these 18 counties. Right. And the state has titling data, and they break it down titles by county. And in the 18 counties they got hit, it was just over 126,000 titles, so manufactured homes are in those 18 counties. And that's just under 14% of all the homes in Texas, in just those counties. Because that's the one thing that we've always kind of come around with the experience with disaster is that, I'll say this. Anybody that comes at you after a post-disaster and says, well, temporary housing is 6 months, even if they say 9 months, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
18 months at a minimum, probably closer to 2 to 3 years is what really plays out. And for folks that have lost and are trying to rebuild their homes, or they're trying to get back up on their feet, in various different ways. And so, when you're talking that, even if you're talking 18 months, I mean, you can't live in a tent for 18 months, And so, we'll see market presence from that. I think it will be interesting to see as the evaluation moves forward. And I don't want to speak for anybody, but as far as maybe some consumers that are out there that are wondering about this, folks that had loans on existing homes, and those homes were damaged and destroyed or total losses, I think we could see some of our lenders in this space come into those folks and trying to figure out how best they can all work together to restructure their lives. Doesn't do anybody any good, lender or anybody, to have a bunch of people mass exodus or lose everything, to lose lending portfolios, which is the lender result on some of this stuff. So I think we could see some of that sort of stuff to help people, and that's going to be another market-driven if any of those things can happen, and the lending could get to a point where even folks that don't have cash or maybe don't have enough, disaster assistance, or don't have enough insurance payout to get them completely whole back into something else, maybe some sort of bridge gap there. I think that's what we'll probably end up seeing over the next several years, and then in probably 6 to 9 months, the wheels will begin to start turning on permanent replacement reconstruction efforts. And that's what you've already seen. The president just signed the $15 billion Harvey package. Whether or not there's more that comes in later if they do a budget later on, but at least there's $15 billion. That's going to get chopped up in various different ways. But a massive chunk of that's going to go toward housing. Right. So that process will take time as people go through and apply and do applications, and so folks might know, if they are listening, potentially impacted by this. What I've been told is that the maximum temporary housing FEMA award is per person per applicant is $33,300. In various different forms, so definitely not to a total hit of that amount, but in just the whole spectrum of what have been the registrations with FEMA. It's over 650,000 people have registered with FEMA already. They expect that number could go over 1 million. So that's one kind of set of temporary emergency resources. And I'm talking about when they do later on, big resources coming through reconstruction, redevelopment. That's going to be a whole other pot of money, and that is administered. So Congress will take that money typically and appropriate it. The federal overlay of that will be Housing and Urban Development, HUD, who will write some top line rules on distributing that money. Then they will send that money down to local jurisdictions for larger jurisdictions and or the state. The state agency tasked with that is the General Land Office since 2011. Mm-hmm. They have that responsibility, so the GLO will be over this permanent reconstruction disaster recovery when that comes through and happens. You'll also have a lot of various different local cities that are of substantial size. They can get direct awards of money from HUD out of those pools, so it won't necessarily go through the GLO. They'll have their own. They all kind of have to play by these kind of top-level umbrella rules. Right. But what we saw after Ike, and what I anticipate moving forward, these local governments are local kind of a collection of governments are called Council of Governments, COGS for short. So the COGS will get the money and set the rules, take the applicants, and distribute it locally. We know that the commissioner, been told by staff, that the commissioner of the GLO, Commissioner Bush, that they believe, quite rightly so, that money dispersed down locally, get it down locally into those folks that are in those communities, been in those communities, knows what those communities need to rebuild those communities is the best way to try to get the funds moving. So we'll see probably a lot of emphasis on local and pushing it down on that, which means for you, if you're a retailer out there, if you're in this space, if you're in these local spaces, if you're consumers, it's important to get involved. It's important to pay attention to that local stuff when it comes through. I mean, other than you're going to have people who are directly and adversarially impacted by these storms. I mean, just on a pure numbers basis, the amount of money that's going to come down, should make everybody sit up and pay attention, because it's going to be a lot. After Ike, we got $3 billion. Okay. Wow. They've already talked about 15 for Harvey. I've seen estimates and requests from that have said that the full impact could be 180 billion, but I'm hearing some of the housing impact is around 60 billion. So, we don't know what that else is going to be, but I would just say, got to participate, got to get in there, got to make sure that the folks that are drawing up those rules, taking the applicants, know of our housing product, know of our housing option, allow us to participate and be a housing option, educate them, and that's a big thing, a big focus probably what TMHA is going to be doing this next year, is trying to educate folks on our modern housing product to make sure we can participate in those programs full tilt.
So what does it mean by participating, AP? In my mind, manufactured housing would be the first solution for a tragedy like this. The fact that we can build these homes so quickly and offer housing right away, that's something we can do to get them out of these tents.
Yeah, this is where this interview really took a turn. Like I said, I went into this thinking we were going to find out about how the factory-built housing industry was meeting this need for immediate and long-term housing in the wake of Harvey. And it really turned into an interview about how DJ and his team at TMHA are protecting people's basic rights here in the state of Texas to choose their home.
Well, what does that exactly mean, AP?
Well, let's back up real quick to that special legislative session DJ was talking about here in the beginning.
I was reading on one of those regulations. Y'all were able to get pushed through the right to stay law, or the right to keep your home in that park. I know that directly affects consumers. Can you talk a little bit about on that?
Sure. Yeah. With this last recent regular session, we helped try to advance and advocated for two bills, and one that you're speaking out ultimately was Senate Bill 1248. And that bill came about because we kept having experiences and getting feedback where communities, existing manufactured home communities, where local government had changed the zoning underneath the community. So maybe one day it was allowed, maybe they got annexed, so it wasn't, and then they made it commercial, they made it industrial or agriculture. They made it something so that whatever the community was essentially grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. Technically, what that's called is a non-conforming use. Right, so no, they don't really say grandfathering too much, but like the technical term is a non-conforming use, and they grant a variance for that grandfathered community. What we were seeing and getting reported on was when residents and community owners both, when they wanted to upgrade homes, they wanted to bring in a new home. They liked their community, but they wanted to bring in a new home, or maybe there was a vacancy and they wanted to bring in a new house to fill up. Or if you've seen, some of these communities that have been purchased recently by some, larger institutional investors, we've got a lot of kind of mom and pop community operators that have been doing it for a really long time. So they might be the original creators of the communities back in like the 60s and 70s, and now they're in their 80s and 90s, right. And their kids or anybody else don't want it, and they're looking for an exit strategy, right? And so they sell these communities, and a lot of times, the people will come in and they'll be able to upgrade and improve them. And like I said, including the residents themselves. You got a lot of folks that live in something, and then they decide they'd want to upgrade. They need more space. They have more kids, whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, we were facing a lot of local jurisdictions and cities that I kind of summarize it as: you move it, you lose it. And so the way that this gets a little bit into the weeds, but the way that it would work is they say, okay, you're a non-conforming use, and when you abandon your non-conforming use for a certain amount of time, and that was all determined locally by local ordinances. Some had it 90 days, some had it 30 days, some had it 13 days. Mm-hmm. But if you abandon your non-conforming use, it's gone forever. And it never made sense to us because we always thought and associated you need to treat the community as a whole, through the boundaries of the community with all the lots. Well, they weren't doing that. They were saying, you move that one home off that lot and you don't replace it in 30 days, then that lot is now dead. And the way that they would enforce it is they would refuse to hook up utilities to a new home being brought in. So we didn't think that was right. So we went to friends of ours and we told them that story, and they agreed with us. They didn't think that was right. So we got a House bill and a Senate bill filed. Representative Lucio in the House, a Democrat out of the Valley, and Senator Buckingham, Republican senator, kind of out of a lot of she's out of Lakeway, but Senate districts are large. Both filed a bill, so we had Republican, Democrat, House and Senate, two versions, identical bill. And the way that we normally run them is we run both horses parallel. Mm-hmm. And at some point in the 140-day legislative session, one will go faster, one might die, one might whatever. Anyway, the horse that got across the finish line through a tremendous amount of work. It's probably the hardest bill I've ever worked on to pass. By far, not probably, by far the hardest bill. We were opposed at every turn. Everybody, all the cities came out against it. The Texas Municipal League came out against it. They were against the bill, worked against it. We had an adverse amendment from lobbyists representing the city of Fort Worth that got thrown on us in a surprise kind of attack on the last day. We had to get that pulled back out. We were constantly up against the deadline headlines. But we were fortunate enough, got it across. The Governor Abbott signed the bill, went into effect on September 1st. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So originally, in the original version, we had that they couldn't do what's called amortize. So the way that you basically kill a non-conforming use, they can't just outright say, boom, you don't get to use it that way anymore, because it opens them up to an unconstitutional taking, because they're not giving any compensation. So the way around that is what they do is what they call an amortization. So they'll come to the property owner that has a specific use, and they'll say, you can use this for 5 more years or 15 more years or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it varies based off the type of use that's there, right? As far as the courts will look at to determine whether or not, that was too aggressive, that was a taking versus that was reasonable. And it runs the whole spectrum if you look at the case law. Like, you've got some that, like concrete aggregate businesses that need to mine, they'll give them 15, 20 years. But if it's like a sexually oriented business, they can give them like 3 months. And like that reasonable standard depends on what you are. And so we originally said, like, we don't want you to have the ability to amortize. We don't want you to have the ability at all to close them down. And they really had heartburn over that. We ultimately decided that we want to condense our ask down to be as simple as possible. We want the right to replace. We want footprint. That's it. That was our message. We just stayed on that message because we had examples of where cities had offended that in an egregious, non-defensible way. It was a way that we could isolate our issues into what we thought was the most advantageous politically for us to run the bill. And the reason we gave up on the amortization was I went back and started looking, and while they have this amortization powers, the cities never use them when it comes to manufactured home communities. And the reason is because it's not a legal issue, it's a political one. As city council members, they don't want to be the ones responsible, and mayors, for closing a community and going to all those residents and saying, you're out on the street.
That makes sense.
The media comes, everywhere, where am I going to go? I've lived here all my life, I love this community. They don't want to be that role. So we figured there are other natural barriers from them being able to do that. We need to protect these other instances where they're exploiting it and they're doing things that we thought were wrong.
With these, it sounds like you're fighting the local jurisdictions, right? The cities, the city council?
In a lot of ways. I mean, I say we're fighting with them. We are in that sense. We were definitely up against them, and they definitely did not like those. They don't like anything that infringes on their, kind of abilities. I mean, we would prefer to work with them. We would prefer to educate them about what the modern homes, the modern products are. So much of our difficulty is this perception and stigma of, kind of yesterday's homes, your grandma's trailer home. And a lot of times when we educate anyone, whether state officials or regulators or city folks about what the modern product is, modern home is, we have a better shot at winning hearts and minds. But sometimes you don't win hearts and minds, and sometimes they don't want to be won. And when that's the case, and they're doing stuff that comes adversarial to our industry, it's my job to organize, rally the troops, put a plan in place, and try to achieve to do state laws that protect us and promote our industry.
And it sounds like this wasn't, definitely affects the industry, but this was also, you got residents, individual families, their right back to replace their housing, their choice of housing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's funny you were talking about this. Now, we covered this in one of our original podcasts where we were tackling the myth of trailer trash. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of this stuff in the news, these city councils, and they were saying, well, crime's going to go up, or this and that and the other. And when we started doing our research, the foreclosure rate on factory-built housing is actually less than site-built because it's more affordable. Right. There were no verifiable facts that crime goes up in manufactured home communities or any of that. So, obviously there's that stigma, but why do you think these local governments, they're facing affordable housing crisis in every town in Texas.
Right.
It's a problem. We are the solution. Why do you think there's so much fight against that?
That's a great question. Maybe it's a multitude of things, but I would probably still hang my hat on the fact that it's a misunderstanding of what the modern home is that we offer. I think it's a bad perception issue that they have, that they're not seeing what we could provide, moving forward. And you're absolutely right. The affordable housing issue, and in particular, it's everywhere. But you get, let's just take off and concede for sake of argument, a lot of the super urbanized centers. Let's say that you're Austin, you're Dallas, you're whatever. A lot of that, they were going to require density. They got to go up, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things we've been looking at is a disturbing trend that smaller, what you would more associate with as rural Texas cities, which are normal kind of bread and butter markets for us, are starting to follow whatever playbook it is that prohibits manufactured housing.
Right.
And many times the cities that are doing this, it is completely, it's not, not only do they have an affordable housing need, but it's completely contrary to any of their demographics that they have. Yeah. And so, I'll get conspiratorial for a second on this podcast. What we have seen, the trends are in various different small cities, is that typically the movement to ban manufactured housing starts with the voluntary members of the Zoning and Planning Commission. Even in your, let's call it, modest to lower income Texas cities, the people that volunteer and participate, by and large, on those planning and zoning commissions are the most well-off people and individuals in that city. Mm-hmm. They will hatch the idea they don't want any more, quotation fingers, mobile homes.
Right.
They want to get rid of them, right? Whether they want to get rid of the homes and this thing, or they think that they want to get rid of the people that they think live in the homes. Mm-hmm. But the homes are easy to attack, right? Because you don't want to attack the people, and they've got other kind of fair housing issues and things like that. But there's no protection against housing type.
Right.
They hatch a plan and then go to city staff and say, we want to set you to work on how we would go about doing this. And the staff starts churning it. And before long, it gets brought up as a recommendation from planning and zoning, vetted through city staff to be presented to a city council. Those are the actual locally elected officials. And if there is not, local folks that are paying attention that can intercede at a local political level, at that level, you'll get a lot of these city councils that'll rubber stamp this stuff.
Wow, that's crazy. We actually talked about that in one of our first episodes, AP. How city councils were making decisions on outdated stereotypes to choose whether manufactured homes went in certain areas. And it's crazy to see how such a small group of people can make decisions on whether another group can upgrade their home or not.
Yeah, it is, Mousetrap, and luckily DJ and his team at TMHA were able to get that law changed and passed September 1st. Mm-hmm. But as you'll hear, we're actually seeing this again now in the wake of Harvey, where local jurisdictions are using this as a possible option to prevent manufactured housing from coming back into their cities.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I found most interesting when you were telling me earlier. It's not just about the money, it's also about zoning in a lot of areas where, like you were saying, folks lost their home that's 2 or 3 generations down the road and it was site built, but now the cost of rebuilding that site built home in that area, these folks don't have that money. They don't have the economic means. Manufactured homes should be the solution in those areas, but without us getting involved, TMHA getting involved and making sure we are considered as part of that solution, how else are these folks going to rebuild permanently?
Well, and I'll jump on that one. It's fresh on my mind, but maybe I shouldn't say it, but I think I'm going to anyway. The other concern that I have, and we haven't seen it in widespread use, but we have seen it in isolation, and I guess maybe the best way to do it is I'll leave the name of the city out. But there was one city that we're dealing with right now. They had 2 manufactured home communities that were 100% loss. They were not in the floodplain. They were not in the 100-year floodplain, not required to get flood insurance. They had loans. They had a commercial loan. There was no flood insurance, just like these multi-million-dollar homes in various areas of Houston, similarly not in floodplains, not required to get flood insurance. 100% loss in this community. It's a privately owned community by an elderly couple who spent their life savings buying these communities. He's a community owner who's more or less beloved. I mean, this is not a slumlord, trailer trash, community owner. He buys turkeys at Christmas for his residents. They have functions. They all know him by his first name. It was and is a tight-knit community that's been devastated. The city has now come in and said, first, to underlie where their whole intent was, they've had off-the-record remarks and flippant comments that if city officials had their way, there'd be no mobile homes in this city, period. They have come through and they've layered on all of these requirements on the cleanup, and they've on the utilities. They said that they didn't control the utilities and that was on the community owner, and actually they did control the utilities. They've layered on all these additional foundation requirements and infrastructure requirements on these homes. That's well and above anything else, essentially making it, with their true intent, to make it cost prohibitive to bring homes back in. If that weren't enough, they have now told the owner that even if they stomach the tremendous expense for the lot development costs just to bring in new homes, and by the way, there are homes ready to go in. I mean, these people are still in shelters and they want to come back to this community. That the city is now telling them that they cannot clean up and replace homes, a community street at a time. These are 160 space communities, big communities, pretty big communities. They can't do them section by section. They can't do it road by road. If they're going to do it, they got to do the entire community all at the same time, or they can't. Now, why would you say that? Why would you have that requirement? What's the justification there? There's no safety concern there. There's no, why are they doing that? And that stuff just, keeps me up at night. It irritates me, gets me fired up. I get angry about it. We're working to help those folks. We want those tenants to get back there. We want that community owner to get back up on his feet. And, we're having to overcome hurdles like that.
Well, I think local is what impacts our customers the most.
Huge.
Where we're at, just south of San Antonio, there's 2 or 3 towns that immediately come to mind. The town of Natalia, the town's almost entirely built of factory-built housing, and yet now there's new laws that don't allow it in. And I look around, it's almost like this: you're watching this town commit suicide because nobody in that town can afford to build a site built.
Right.
It's god-awful expensive, and it just, to me, it doesn't make sense. But I guess, like I said, it is easier to attack the home than the people. And if you've got a vested interest in land being used for your own gain, it makes sense to kind of pull those people out. What other things is TMHA doing to protect the people living in these homes, the people that count on this as their way of housing? Well,
I think the way the industry doesn't exist without our consumers.
Right.
So the consumers have to come first, because if they don't come and they don't push us and they don't drive our industry, none of us have jobs. And so they're of paramount concern. Their satisfaction, their continual positive stories about their life and their experience are what change perception, right? And I've got a personal story on this. My background, just so you know, is my folks. I'm basically a generation away from poverty out of West Texas. Both my great grandfathers were oil roughnecks out of West Texas and worked incredibly hard. Were very, very poor. My parents came to Austin. My dad worked in state government for 30 years, had another side business on the side. But when it came time for one side of my maternal grandparents, couldn't work anymore because they got older. They lived in Alpine. He was literally a cowboy on a ranch. Running cattle.
Real Texan.
Real Texan, yeah. His name was Irvin Cavanis. Everybody called him Slim. So I'm not. This stuff you can't make up.
Right.
So they didn't have any money. They didn't have anything to retire on. They'd spent everything. They'd always lived paycheck to paycheck. And my parents wanted to bring them in, and they needed someplace close, and they needed a solution. My dad found in 1983, I believe it was, a piece of property out near Lake LBJ, and it had a 72, still has, a 72 Lancer single section on it. My dad bought that home the only way he could afford it, because he had a primary, our residence where me and my sister and we grew up. Only way he could afford it and get underwritten was to do owner financing from the guy he bought it from. So he did basically, I think it was a 15 or a 20 year note. This was back in the 80s at a 18.5% interest rate, I think. for 60. It was the lot is a pretty decent amount of land, and on a little canal, and then the house. It was for $63,000. And they made payments on that, and that's where my grandparents lived all for 30 years. And my grandfather, literally, like with hospice there, at the age of 94, died in that house. We grew up going to that house. We went and summered out there. We went, fish fries, Thanksgiving, Christmases, especially when they got older. My sister, who's got 2 little nieces, because when my grandfather, it was difficult for them to leave. Both of her girls got christened in that house. Nice. And so my roots run deep in this, and I believe in the house because I believe that had that opportunity, had that home not existed at that price point, I mean, my parents couldn't have afforded to put my grandparents anyplace else, and my grandparents couldn't have afforded. I mean, we really don't know what they would have done. Yeah. And I mean, so in that situation, on a consumer basis, for me personally and my family, I mean, it was transformative. It transformed my life, the memories and everything that I've got, the quality of life that my grandparents were able to enjoy, and to see their happiness. I mean, I learned how to play 42 dominoes and played for years at the table inside that house. So, I mean, I tell that story. It's a very long-winded story just to kind of say that, I am those people. I am people that live in and that was a mobile home. That was a pre-74, Right. I mean, and I believe in manufactured housing. I think a lot of consumers believe in manufactured housing.
You can just tell from listening to DJ share his story how passionate and connected he is to the people that he serves. The guys wrap it up by talking about what the future has in store for the TMHA and the manufactured home industry.
I know you got to run, DJ. The last question for you. In a perfect world, TMHA gets everything, every legislation, everything they want passed. 10 years from now, where is the manufactured home industry in Texas?
Probably, I mean, the quick and direct answer is parity. We want to compete as a housing choice option equally on a flat, fair playing field. We don't feel in so many markets that we have that opportunity right now. I believe that this industry, if given the opportunity to compete at the various different price points of comparing us to other housing choice options, whether it be site-built, whether it be even multifamily apartment, allow us at various different price points. So whether that's a complete purchase price, or really let's break it down to what your monthly housing expenses costs are. Right. For the needs of most of the population, if we're given that opportunity to compete, just that, I think we win. I think we prevail more times, more often than not. And I think that removing, so 10 years from now, my job for the next decade and maybe longer is that I want to continually go after eliminating the thumb on the scale that we so often experience for whatever the sins were in the past, correct, perceived, made up, real, whatever, doesn't matter. Moving forward in the future, how do we level the playing field so that we can compete and go in to these markets, show what we have, offer what we have, because I think when we do that, we're going to win.
And I think that's really important as we make these bigger and prettier and nicer looking, to fight that stigma, to not forget that we solved that problem, the affordable housing problem. That's the biggest problem this country needs solved, and that's really what I think we'll be able to do. So appreciate you taking the time, DJ.
Anytime, I'd love to do it.
Yeah, love that we've got an organization that fights for our rights as retailers, our consumers' rights to be able to live in the home they choose, and it's an awesome convention you'll put together.
Well, thank you. I deserve probably very little credit. I've got a really good staff, and it's not over. We're working really hard. It's one of those. We stand on our head for about 3 days, but we get through it. We survive them, and but no, we love doing. We love the people. We love the tremendous turnout. We've had over 310 attendees at this year's event, so that's been really good. And so yeah, we've tried to make this and tried to do it, structure it in a way that it really is a member benefit to try to come and do this stuff. And for anybody that's listening, maybe not consumer based, but anybody in the industry, that couldn't be and couldn't attend any of these things, but maybe saw some of the stuff that we had, the education seminars. As long as we can agree with our presenters, which I think we could, on some rebroadcasting agreements, we're recording all of this. And eventually, after we get it edited down and everything else, we hope to upload it all to part of our catalog, our online catalog. So, trying to make sure we stay connected to the online and technologically more savvy folks, or people, in El Paso that couldn't make it to Dallas, or down in the valley of McCallum or something like that, so that they can get and cherry pick and look at the things and see if they can kind of get education as well. Because we've got some stuff here that runs the whole gamut from, community owner type stuff. We've got some folks coming in and talk about solar panels, and obviously you guys are coming to talk about, selling wood through technology. I mean, so there's a lot of different things that we tried to cast a very wide net, and hopefully we're going to have all that available.
Yeah, I think y'all nailed it. So
yeah, cool.
Look forward to next year. Thanks, DJ.
Cool, thank you.
All right. Well, that does it for this special edition of the Doublewide Dudes, covering the TMHA convention up in Dallas. Also, keep an eye out on our website at findmymobilehomes.com, where you'll be able to watch Broston's presentation on bringing technology into the mobile home industry.
Yeah, check it out. And big thanks to DJ Pendelton for taking his time to sit down and interview with us. Big thanks to Caitlin Nort for setting us up at the Four Seasons and getting us with DJ for the interview. The Harvey soundbite was adopted from a CNN Post compilation of broadcasts from KSAT, NOAA, KPRC, KXAN. Big thanks to the reporters that kept us as a state of Texas in the loop before, during, and of course after Hurricane Harvey.
Absolutely.
And our thoughts continue to be with those families affected by this tragedy.
Yeah, and Texas took a big hit, but as always, we'll bounce back. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you on the next one.